mostly, thank you for coming to honor us by honoring Frank Schroeder, Black Politics Act 1. I'm extremely excited because we have Jeremiah Ojo, who's been a really great friend to the gallery. He's an art consultant and gallery management with Creative Milieu. Did I pronounce it correctly? Creative Milieu is his company, and I've just watched Jeremiah grow from the finance world into the arts world, and it's just been a real pleasure to watch him really come and enhance what we do as galleries. We need more people like Jeremiah, so I'm really excited. The number one thing I'm excited about is that we introduced me to Frank Schroeder. About a year ago, I think it was about a year ago, he introduced me in September, would you look at this artist? And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. I love the work, I love the energy, I love the spirit, the essence of everything about it. I love the influence of the work. Let me see more. And with that, I immediately said, yes, I would love to work with Frank Schroeder. This is something I've been waiting for. As I say, I'm always looking for emerging masters. And when I saw this, this is immediately what I thought about. As you learn, as you hear more from Frank, you'll hear the influence, you'll hear the thought behind the work, which is very thought-provoking. You'll understand a lot of the meaning and how it ties in with what's going on in America. He's never actually been to the States. He's always lived in France. But there's so many similarities to what's going on that side of the world that's going on this side of the world. So it's just like full circle, if you will. So it just shows how we're all connected. But yeah, without further ado, I could talk on and on about this work. I'm going to introduce Jeremiah Ojo, who's going to take it from here and talk about Black Politics Act 1. And I hope you'll enjoy it.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, September. This is home. I grew up in Atlanta, and being back is always great to see so many familiar friends, faces, and even artwork. Also, shout out to Rachel, the new gallery manager here, who is phenomenal. She's been wonderful in supporting. Wave, say what's up. In supporting this event and many other things. So thank you for your help and support. It's great to be back. I really love this artist, Frank. And he is not only a client, but a friend and really a brother. I've had the pleasure of visiting him last summer, him and his family. He lives in the south of France, and really got a intimate look into understanding him as a person, but more importantly, first his work, and then more importantly him and the ecosystem to which he produces this beautiful body of work, but also he's been working as an artist for decades. Once he comes back online here, Frank?
Yeah?
You're on pause.
Yeah. You can't hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see. We can't see you.
I'm sorry.
Is that me or is that you? No, that's you.
I don't know. I will check.
Okay. All right. Bonjour. Comment ça va?
Fine. You can see me?
Yeah, it's on pause again.
I'm sorry.
Technical difficulties. You all understand. It's FaceTime.
Sorry, just to check my iPad.
Just one moment. So I don't know if you guys, while he's situating, I don't know if you had a chance to read a little bit about this body of work. I don't know if you all got a copy of the press release or not. No? Not in your seats? All right. September is handing it around just to kind of give you some context.
Can we
You want me to call you back?
Yes.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. Thanks for you all for coming today for the second opening day titled Black Politics. First, I would thank September for being my gallerist in Atlanta and hosting this event today. I'm sure we'll do great things together in the long term. And I would like to make a big up to my friend, my brother Jeremiah, for supporting me for many years now and helping us today for the organization of this event today. This show is titled Black Politics because I'm working on a series of 50 original name by number pieces represented real traditional African masks, and generally from Western Africa, where I lived for almost 20 years. But I reinterpreted into a contemporary mood, original and unique style, mixing painting, collage, and sticks. And you never saw elsewhere my very personal style, and it participates for me to the value of my works. With Black Politics series, my will is to claim all Black people are contemporary people. My will is to claim all Black people as roots somewhere in Africa, and we need to use them to know who we are. My will is to claim Black people is no more only poverty, dust, mud, disease, wars, or underdevelopment. My will is to claim we need to use our roots to project us in the future. And my will is to claim we are innovative, modern, dynamic, and technological. And my will is to claim we do need to take entirely our place in this world and how a different society ensure we are now a full part of history. So that's it. I hope no one forgot their checkbook. Keep in mind there will only be 50 original pieces and never more. And then one day the world will be divided into unequal parts. Those who are honor of Black politic pigs and the others. Those who are full parts of the rise of contemporary Black people movement and the others. Those who affirm their modernity by having the oldest roots in the world and the others. Choose a camp. Choose well. Enjoy the show. Anyway, no one will get out of this gallery without a painting under his arm.
Merci beaucoup. Thanks, Frank.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing the context of the work. And as he explained, we've been friends and have worked together for a number of years. And of course, spending some time with him in his home, but also many conversations and FaceTime over the years. And even in preparation for the show, in conversation with September, he's been working on this body of work, well, thinking through this body of work for a number of years, and we've been in conversation about what it is. One of the questions that we had come up, I'm gonna address kind of more broadly, but it's like, what is Act One? Frank, do you want to describe why you entitled the show Black Politics Act One with kind of that reference point?
Because I'm working on 50 pieces this series, and I couldn't do the same whole painting at the same time. So I cut the series, and you have the first series here, and I'm working on the end of the paintings. But Black Politics, because you asked me why I call this series Black Politics?
That, but specifically having Act One.
Because we will have an Act Two, and the Act Two will be I painted 30. More or less 30 Black politics at this time, and I need to paint 20 more paintings. So we cannot exhibit all the paintings at the same time. That's why it's called Act One, and we will prepare Act Two.
Yeah, and also in reference to the thematic way that he's presenting the ideas of Black identity, and as we all know. Being Black African people, the multiplicity of who we are and how we exist in spaces cannot just be in 25 acts or 1 act or even 50 acts. One of the things that personally drew me to the work is the use of traditional West African masks, right? So this idea of Blackness and how it exists outside of the continent, particularly with his experience growing up in France as an Ivorian, a Black African man, understanding the nuance of what Blackness means, right? And living particularly in a predominantly white Eurocentric society, oftentimes we are labeled just as Black, right? Black American, Black guy, like it is just a short form signifier that doesn't accommodate for any nuance. Earlier, Frank and I curated this really amazing playlist of music. If you're on our mailing list, you were able to get a chance to listen to Black Politics Act One curated playlist. A lot of this work is influenced by Frank's love for hip hop, jazz, Afrobeat, and other forms of African and African diaspora music. That music is very emblematic of the nuance of who we are, from not just line, form, color, shape, and tone, but also the visage, like the actual face, right? And the textures. One of the things that I think I was particularly drawn to is the collaging. So when you look at a lot of the work, you want to talk about that, Frank? Actually, you talk.
The collage music? I can talk about music and the mixed media. Regarding the music, we talk about plastic art, but for me, the music is the same in the same way. I use black music in general, not only black music, but when I work, I listen music, and depending of what I want to do, I'm listening to some kind of music, and the music influences my work and the final results. And today I'm working on the fourth version of the Last Supper in my bag. It will be a hip hop version, and when I work on this large canvas, I listen hip hop music or jazz music and it helps me to be in the real act of creation, specifically with hip hop theme. And regarding collage, I use a mix of paintings, paper, and oil or dry sticks, and because it gives a depth, it's difficult to have only with painting, and it allows me to add more feeling and more things I want to tell in my work, and I don't use any glue, any kind of this material. I only use painting, so I cut the paper, I paint the paper, and I stick the paper on the canvas with fresh painting. And when it's dry, the paper is really good stuck in the canvas, and it allows me to add a personal touch to my paintings. When you will see whole black politics, the main part of the black politics has paper mixed with painting and sticks, and it gives more depth. And for me, I can explain and because for me, a painting, it's not just color on the canvas. It's a story. It's more like windows. Window, you can go through the window, and I try to tell a story with each paintings, and using paper, using collage, using a mix of different material help me to tell my story and to have the better depth for the people who is front of the paintings, and I try to attract him and do my max. I try to go through the paintings, and he's a part of the story. And for me, mixing paintings, paper, and sticks helped me for that.
Yeah, and it's really amazing how you're able to shift using color, tones, forms, and shapes to draw the viewer in to see different aspects of the mask, but also characteristics, right? Because you can be as light and as dark as night and still be black. And that's the beauty of black, right? So yeah. when we look at the physical attributes of blackness, it's important to also understand the social aspects, because that's what influences our understanding of blackness, not as a monolith, but obviously how we're choosing to exist autonomously in space, not in response to what has happened to us, because I think in many discussions now in contemporary black culture is understanding Africanness or blackness in response to slavery or the transatlantic slave trade and or colonialism, but blackness extends far beyond that. One of the references you made very early on in building this beautiful body of work was talking about modernity, right? This idea of like being civilized. And even that language was created to separate us from our own understanding of our innovation and our technology. So what he has really done, and many artists work and they don't know the power that they create. You know, they position, they bring color, they bring life, they bring saturation, they make you feel a certain type of way, but it's not until you really sit with a piece and you really analyze line, form, color, shape, tone, and not only compare it with your life, but those around you. And the unique thing about using the term black and understanding blackness from a societal standpoint in looking at this work is each different piece shifts you to a different idea of blackness. And using collage enhances that, but also the narratives behind each individual piece. Frank, I'm going to ask you to make reference to one particular piece that September, myself, and Rachel have just been enthralled with. If you were here for the opening in November, right?
Yes.
The gallery looked different. It had a number of other acts within the series, but I thought because of the breadth of his work and my familiarity with him, particularly I wanted to see like what's the pathology of him coming up with this work. Like, where is he deriving these images or these forms from? So I picked two of my personal favorite pieces, Alice in Wonderland, which is to my right, to your left, and then also of the Seven Sins series, Wrath, to your left. So Frank, actually, let's talk about Wrath, because I think it's really interesting how, and I'm going to point out some things, Frank, and then I'll allow you to give them the full synopsis. But if we look at this piece here, Wrath, we see three figures that have some language above it. The judge, the guilty, and the sentence. Frank, can you talk a little bit about this piece?
Yeah, sure. This painting, it's part of. I like to work with a series of paintings on a theme. So many years ago, I worked on the 7 deadly sins. So I made the first series in medium-sized paintings, and I found very interesting to work on it. So I decided to work on with the larger size and a new series of 7 deadly sins, and in the sins there is wrath, and this painting, so the second version of wrath, and I thought wrath leads to violence. And if you commit violent acts, maybe you can be judged, and maybe you can be judged guilty, and maybe you can have a sentence. And I thought it would be interesting to have the three steps from the wrath, the origin, and the final result, and the sentence, and in the middle, guilty. So it means you have a bad feeling in the beginning. You are hungry. You are violent. You commit something wrong, and then you are judging because justice is here for that. So you are judged, and then you have your sentence. And I thought the wrath was not only a word, only a concept, but it was I'd say a part of life. It was like a movie. It's dynamic. It's not just wrath is wrath, or treachery, or greed is greed. And especially for wrath or for treachery, you can explain this concept and these scenes this scene with different steps and not only one static figure. That's why I use three black hairs. Black because to underline the violence and the anger but I thought it was more dynamic with having these three steps.
Yeah, and something that I reflect on, knowing and seeing more broadly of the Seven Sins series, is understanding again this idea of blackness. In contrast to the other pieces, I was talking with a friend Floyd, particularly about this piece in contrast to others, that in the judicial system, not just here in America, but broadly around the world, when you're not just a person of color, but very specifically a black person, you're showered with all of these characteristics that are negative. And it doesn't allow, one, the jury to see you not guilty until proven guilty. All of the societal narratives that are imposed upon you are shifted solely square on your skin color. And
yes, John, but it's also a politic painting because I'm French. I'm living in France, and the things are different in France compared to US regarding the black people situation. And for example, in France, the cops don't shoot black people in the street. It doesn't exist. Even if there is racism or many problems, but the situation of the black people in France is very different compared to black people in the US. So anyway, even in France and more in US, where you are black, you have many more chance to be accused, to be judged guilty, and to have a sentence very hard to support. And this painting is also there is a subtitle, a politics subtitle. If you are black, unfortunately, you have more chance to be arrested, to be judged, and to be condemned. And that's why the head are black, not white or blue. And I choose black because I thought it could talk to black people, and it could illustrate certain politics and social disease in US or in France. In France too, if you are black in France and you are declared you are guilty, maybe you can have a sentence more important than if you are white or. But I think whole is politics. Even your basis idea or the first idea, it's not to make a politic declaration, a politic act, a politic painting. It's politics. That's why I call my series Black Politics too, because it means I use mask. I could call my story Black African Mask, and that's it. So I wanted to art film we using real traditional African mask. We black people, even black people have roots in Africa for. First roots of humanity are in Africa. Today we are contemporary people, and it's a politic affirmation, and that's why I called my series Black Politics. But with Wrath, it's the same thing. And when I did my first version of the Last Supper, two Last Supper are to have a politic idea, and I don't know if you will talk about the Last Supper, but I can talk about the Last Supper with the politic option too.
We will come back to that, but I also want to allow this to be a dialogue, a conversation. So let's talk about so far what Frank has shared about the work and what you understand about the work and additional questions. Favorite pieces? Yes.
Well, about the masks, I'm curious where did the masks come from? Or were you in the gallery with masks that you studied and that you sort of, modeled or just painted from actually seeing them? And did they come from a specific region or all over? I'm interested in that.
Were you able to hear that, Frank, or no?
No, sorry.
It was too faint. Okay, so she was inquiring on specifically your choice of mask. I know you made reference that they're all West African masks. Were you in the studio with these masks, or did you do research online about specific masks and tribes? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I lived in Africa for 20 years in the Ivory Coast. Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, it's forbidden. It's the region of the country is Côte d'Ivoire, not Ivory Coast, so Ivory Coast for English people. And I traveled in many countries in West Africa, but I was based in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast. So I visited many museums, specifically with masks on different tributes. And but now, when I decided to work on the series, I work on I don't have any mask at home because I don't have. I work with the rig man. I have a mask I've seen in Ivory Coast, and I made many research from Google Internet to and have many I've thousands of different type of masks now in the image bank. I made a database with a different masks of all countries in West Africa, and I use these images to work on my painting. But all paintings, each black politics is a real African mask. I didn't imagine any mask. All these masks exist in Africa and in museum or in some village in the village of my father, because I'm black. My father was African, my mother was French, white French, and my father black African. So I have an half-breed. Métis in France, and but when I went to my father's village when I was young, there was a specific place in the village with specific mask for specific ceremonies, and you can see this mask outside if it's a ceremony, the mask are hidden in the house clothes, and it's very strict, and I remember the mask I've seen when I was young, and I created a database with research in Google to have a huge database of masks, and I use these images to work now.
And I think it's interesting understanding mask in the diasporic sense. And thank you for sharing about that experience, because I know for myself as a first-generation American, but both parents Nigerian, specifically Yoruba, and the tradition of whether mask making or art making has had its taboo, from specifically as it relates to religion, right? We're in a time now where many people are damaging, burning, literally tearing down museums and shrines because of tensions around religion, and understanding that these masks aren't just aesthetic objects, but they're also spiritual, right? To worship or honor gods and or space and people. So
just to press in Africa, no mask haven't all masks have a sense and signification. Religious, voodoo, or whole African mask have a sense of, and nobody tried to mask just for having a mask. All masks except the mask for tourists. You would take the same Ashanti mask with an overall. It's for the European tourists, but the real mask, non-real mask, is done only for whole masks are have an interest and a specific
Right.
specific meaning and religious, and it's very very strict and.
Yeah.
It,
And I'm curious, what has been other people's experience interacting with African indigenous objects? Has there been a taboo around either the collection or placement or even the engagement of masks or statues for any of you?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I don't.
Oh, I was asking the crowd what their engagement is with African objects, particularly as it relates to tribal or indigenous masks. Really now,
I'm not sure. See, I'm not sure. Africans are still linked to their roots, to their village or but much more for traditional ceremonies with dance or with but masks today in Africa are losing the more and more the primary signification, and now people in Africa mask it's not very important for the people who live in the cities, for example.
Sure.
And but I asked myself if I could use this mask, using this mask with in my contemporary artistic life, and because I thought maybe African people could consider it's not good thing to use very very symbolic object and use them to make other things.
So can you talk specifically about how, because looking at this body of work, you mix classical motifs and styles along with traditional African form, shapes, and a mask. Can you talk about the confluence of those two, particularly with you being French and African, and why you specifically, through all of your work, kind of bounce between traditional
Yes.
African aesthetics and European?
Yeah, when my background is European and classical. I was born in Paris. I spent my 11 or 12 first years in France. So I was really my first background is in France. So when I was interested with the art and painting, especially, I got my background was classical. When I talk about classical background, I talk about painter, French and European painter from the 19th century and the whole 20th century. So Picasso, Matisse, and before Renoir, Monet, Goya, Velasquez. Those were called masters, and then contemporary painter like Picasso, Matisse, Cézanne, etc. Miro, Dali, and my first background was European and white culture. And when I went to Africa, I was 12 years ago, more or less. I discovered a new culture, new symbol, new different way to think, different way and I needed to make a mix between both, and it's difficult when you are children. Difficult to make a mix and not choose one. not this one. And I just began to make a mix of the two culture when I was in school art. I was no more in children, and I began to think how to mix, integrate the two very different culture. You cannot compare European culture and African culture. And, it's very very different and artistically too. And it was a challenge to make both. And now and for example, when I work on this series, Black Politics, or when I work on the Last Supper with the Black Politics version of the Last Supper with the 13 blackheads, I tried to make a mix and to incorporate black culture in occidental culture or occidental culture in black culture. There is no how the equal. And if you when you look at when you watch a black painting, a Black Politics paintings, the shape, the basis is African, and then I had shapes or layers with more European influences, and I think the mix of the two culture, it's interesting, and it's dynamic. It allows to not to stay stuck on your place and no move and just say masking wood always the same or always the same white painting and with the same themes. Mixing both, it's interesting, and I consider success. I did it. I did it well.
Thank you, Frank. Yes.
I want to go back to your question. You asked the audience about having African masks. What was the question again?
Yeah.
Let me answer that.
Yeah, so for the audience, and I really want this to be a dialogue, so I'm encouraging you to even offer any opinions, right? No one here is a scholar. We're all learning from each other, even myself. I've learned quite a bit from Frank, September, Rachel. We're all in dialogue with each other, so I'm hoping to get understanding based on your experience. So specifically...
Jordan, just a question. I hope, I'm sorry for all people here. I speak very bad English. I hope everyone can understand me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Merci. He's always worried about his English, but it's much better than he thinks. But specifically, I want to know and hear. Yes, Latrice.
So I am at the Handy's House Museum. We have a pretty extensive collection of African masks, African objects, and what I find when we introduce these objects to others, that they have a lot of questions about what they mean. Mm-hmm. So they don't really just look at them for aesthetic value. They really do have questions about where are they from, what do they mean, are they spiritual, so a lot of that type of dialogue that happens, at the museum whenever we expose people to that work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Other thoughts and reflections? Yes.
I'm a trustee to about 500 African pieces from a professor that can produce. Anyway, my point is that it seems that the mask allows us, it requires us to make peace with our phenotype, with who we are, our aesthetic. And some of that is a challenge within the community to look straight on, because it's clearly African, it's clearly the nose is a certain way, the lips are a certain way, it should be.
Yeah.
But it feels like there's an unspoken thing, perhaps even something that's awkward and uncomfortable for the community, our community, with respect to looking at face on and accepting and embracing the truth.
Yeah. Both of you bring up such great perspectives and experiences, specifically to Joe. When I look at this Don mask over here on Act 18, I see myself. This wide garage nose door of a nose that's oily, beautiful, and black, right? That allows me to breathe and cool my body better because I'm an African man, right? And that's something that I had to come to terms with, of course, being teased as a child, even siblings, lips, all of the features that are black. But even the idea of blackness, again, is also stretched because you look at other forms and shapes and they're not always as broad. So when we were in dialogue earlier this week when we were shuffling around the show, talking about visual literacy, right? We learn how to read words in the English language, and it improves our capacity to understand ourselves. But unfortunately, because of colonialism and the transatlantic slave trade, we've been cut off from representation, right? Seeing ourselves not just amongst ourselves, but deified, right? There's something eternal and universal in seeing your features immortalized in a painting. It's not a photograph. This is something that has movement, gesture, and manifestation in it. So when you see the most perhaps demonstrative depiction of features that are wider, more muscular, or however you want to describe what you see, it's also at a deficit. It's like I haven't seen enough of this, so I have tensions with it. So you have questions, like so many questions. It's like, well, why did they choose this type of face, right? And you're coming to terms with your ideas of beauty, right? In contrast with the person next to you that you may be viewing it with, and or what you consume through media. And I think what's really beautiful about this, and again, going back to this idea of black politics and the politics behind what is blackness, what is Africanness, it first starts with the form, the shape, the color. I mean, the vibrancy of the colors and the intensity of all of the work also hold true to us as African people. I mean, we're also like Southerners. I don't know if everyone here is from the South, but we're in the deep South, right? And so much of what that is represents more purely than anywhere else in the US, Africanness, right? And from the way we cook, wear our hair, the way we speak, even a lot of our slang comes from many parts of West Africa. And that's why we thought it quite poignant to have this conversation in this gallery with you all, because having a conversation with Black, deep Southerners is quite different when talking about blackness and Africanness than those from other parts of the country. You take this to LA, it's like, bro, that's not me. Right? So I want this to be a dialogue. More thoughts about the work. Yes.
Okay, so the masks were the first thing that grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
I'm originally from Kenya and grew up in Ethiopia and Botswana. And when my grandparents became Christian when the colonizers came to East Africa. So my mother didn't grow up with masks. So when our relatives used to come and visit us, we'd take the masks down. Because we had them up because we thought they were beautiful.
Yeah.
But they knew that it would make them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because they were Christian. So traveling, my dad traveled all over the world and would gather masks, West African masks, which were really beautiful to me. And we would have them all over the house with our East African masks. When we moved to McLean, Virginia, we put our masks up and left them up because the people that we lived around lived from all over the world, and they had traveled from Africa, and they had African masks too.
Yeah.
Even though I lived in a predominantly white neighborhood.
Yeah.
So we were comfortable with our masks up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just different. So when I see these, I recognize them.
Yeah, and it's interesting in looking at mask and African spiritual objects. I try to also kind of put that spiritual on it because majority of the masks were, and most aesthetic valued African objects, as we call them in the West, are utilitarian. They were for using something. You see beautiful staffs, thrones, like these were chairs, they weren't just like museums and institutional placement is a Western idea. Many of these objects were ephemeral. They were created specifically for certain spiritual society, group, priest, shaman, who is supposed to use it and activate it in order to worship, pay homage to, and engage the community from a very transcendent standpoint. So when looking at these objects in the West, they are objects of aesthetic value, right? Like the most expensive art, or the most expensive masks sold are the Dan masks, and specifically because they're the way they are stylized. Them and another mask from Zimbabwe, the Kofwebe and Sinufu masks that are generally elongated and have that white kind of kaolin. And kaolin is like a medicinal thing. It's like LSD, basically. Yeah. And I remember in art history, shout out to Georgia State. Yeah. We out here, blue. It was interesting, my professor, God bless her, Dr. Cleveland, I know you're probably gonna see this at some point, thank you, but there was tension about that. Me as a Nigerian, African Yoruba man, now learning about my culture and the history of it, let's call him back, from a white woman who spent 10 years because of Peace Corps, right? She wasn't even like studying African art. She just kind of fell into the love of Africanness because of its aesthetic value. And hold on one second. There's a very interesting point of departure when you learn about yourself through the lens of someone else. Particularly how they choose to describe it. Because even like, I still dance around the words when I describe, it's like broad, muscular, you're like these very aggressive words, just like that blackness, right? And it's a visual vocabulary that many contemporary artists are pushing for right now. Kerry James Marshall is really amazing when you look at just the color black and its elasticity and how you can see the gradient of black. But in its core, it's pushing you to think about skin color and how it occupies space, how it absorbs light, and how we as people occupy space and how we absorb, everything that's around us. So I want to continue on with this conversation about what people are thinking. Yes?
If I could take this back to Grace's point about how uncomfortable the mask made her grandparents, and she described it as the religious aspect of it, the fact that they had a conflict with somehow with their Christian faith. You mentioned earlier how different the conversation is based on the South versus East or West Coast, and I'll go out on a limb and say a lot of that is the discomfort that folk on the West Coast have with the acceptance of their ancestry. Period. Then though I'm curious. Frank chose to highlight the political aspect, and that may make some people uncomfortable. So I guess my question is, the main question I'll ask is, does Frank see all of that in what he is trying to depict here? The religious aspects of it, the spiritual aspects of it, the political aspects of it, the ancestral and aspects of it. Does he intend to try to bring that out in more work, or is it the written dialogue, the curatorial interpretations that he's going to rely upon to bring all of that out?
Sure.
Frank, you still with us? Yeah, I can repeat the question. So, I'm sorry, your name, sir? Don wanted to make reference to and specifically inquire about the mask, and I guess your particular orientation or how you've decided to address the mask, either specifically or inclusively of the religious aspect, the aesthetic aspect of it, we know political, I guess more broadly, but what have you sought, like what specifically were you trying to, what type of conversation were you trying to develop in using the mask?
Yeah, I try to. Because
Oh, Frank, hold on one second.
Yes?
You're on pause. Can you unpause the
Oh,
video?
sorry. Is it good?
C'est bon.
Okay. When I lived in Africa, and when I came back to France after living in Africa, and
Uh-oh. He's speechless. One moment. The connection's probably bad.
And I don't mean to cut Frank off. I'm gonna stand up a little bit just so everybody can see me, and really, I think it's best because we do have art here, and it's best to like capture the facial expression and the way everybody's mouth moves. That's how I like to be heard. Just seeing art, I am not much of a connoisseur nor someone who appreciates art for what most of you guys appreciate it for. But sitting here, I am captivated by the art, right? And just understanding where it comes from. My name is Carr, and I was born and raised in the Congo, and I grew up here. Just being in Africa, growing up in Africa, we were so confined to small places, and there was so many of us, and out of that confinement, and it was just like confined places of like marginalized people, came innovation, right? And there was always a channel through which that innovation was expressed and translated amongst each other, right? One of which was art, which I'm pretty sure not only these masks that this art depict comes from like the expression that innovate, the expression that's genius, right? Like the interaction between the people themselves and their culture. But when I look at the art and look at the title, Black Politic Act 1, I'm wondering if that was done to intrigue the artistry, or the art was created to engage like the topic, right? So was the Black Politic Act 1 done to intrigue how good the art is, or was the art created to engage the conversation of Black politics? All right, because those two are two different things, right? And I don't think it's been made clear, because those two conversations are completely different. Two conversations are completely separate. Because if the Black politics was chosen to engage about the artistry, that conversation goes a little bit like this, right? But if the art was created to engage a conversation on Black politics, it goes a little something different to where we are truly engaging each other on like Black politics. So that's really like my question and that's picking up really right off of what he says, was the art itself created to engage Black politics Act 1? Or was the title chosen to dialogue about the artistry behind the work, which is
Yeah. So, right.
it could.
Yeah.
But that would be even more chaotic than the both, right? It would. It really can. But chaos is good.
Exactly, right?
Yeah,
Tension
chaos
is good, right? It gives rise to the moment, the immediacy of your personal experience and his personal experience and the confluence of that. Now, challenging our understanding, because we're still yet to fully hear from the artist himself. It's like we're all like throwing swords, and it's good because it's important. Because first, from visual literacy, it's like we're casting all our ideas on what we see. We're challenging our own notions of beauty, of blackness, of politics, the conjunction of them, the separation of them, and can they coexist? So Monsieur Schroeder, you're the man of the hour. I'm going to kind of paraphrase. Essentially, they were the same questions, but I want to kind of clarify it and present it to you again.
My subject is. You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I said my subject is politics, not religious, not cultural, it's politics. And my subject is to say, after living in Africa, after living in France, in Europe, the image of black people is always the same. Poor, poverty, violence, no innovation, always using innovation of white people, of other people. And so my subject is politics. My subject is to say we have traditional roots deeply in the ground in Africa from the beginning of humanity. But we are contemporary. We are modern people. We are contemporary people, and we can use our roots, the mask, and transform and use it to be contemporary people. And it means transform traditional mask to modern mask, modern images, modern art, and using different material to do it. And all my series in black politics, it calls black politics because my series is only politics. It says we are not only playing tam tam, or we are not only dancing in the village in Africa under the sun, the nude feet and the dust and the mud. We are contemporary, we are modern, we participate of the evolution of humanity, we create, we innovate, and that's why, for me, I use traditional masks, traditional roots, and I transform them to something contemporary object, and for me, it's politics.
Yeah, and for me, the way that I have both seen it from a personal standpoint, and then how I've been trained through school, in understanding, my professional practice as an art consultant, art business consultant, has been to lean on going back to roots, right? To the point of when we look at art, we engage it from a point of value systems, right? What means the most to us? And then we project that back onto the object. So I like orange. There's an orange piece. I'm going to find a way to derive a narrative for it to make it feel even better to me. So if you don't like orange, then no matter, we're still looking at the same painting. And the beauty of it is we can both arrive at the same physical space, but still be so separated based on our ideas, our values, and our positioning of experiences through life.
But Jeremy, you know
Yep.
what? When you my series, it's not only for black people in US or
Sure.
in France or in Europe. My series is made also for African in Africa, because
Right.
they are the first. They are the first one. We think they are underrated. They are not at the same level of white or Asian people, and that's why African people leave their country and try to reach Europe in the small boats and cross the sea. If they do that, except the fact they don't find jobs in Africa, it's also because African people has a bad idea, a bad image of himself, and I try to explain to African people first, and then black people in general in other countries. You have roots. Be proud of your roots, but you can be modern, you can be contemporary, you can invent, you can be innovative, you can do what you want to do, and look at I use this traditional mask, and I can transform it to something to an contemporary object, and it's politic.
Yeah.
I would segue, because I know we're time and talking about the Last Supper. There was a piece that was actually so called The Last Supper, but there's another piece I'd like to pass around that he did called The Last Supper, Dealing with the Man. It's an incredible piece. So I want to segue into that conversation as well as the Mass. It's built on the traditional Last Supper. But I wanted to speak from my experience when you asked about traditional Mass. I'm a collector, and I love African Mass. But growing up as a little girl, I grew up with my great-grandparents, and I always share this story. We had 3 pictures in our home. One was the Last Supper, JFK, and Martin Luther King. So I can relate. That was my artwork. I saw, Martin Luther King, JFK, and the Last Supper. So we were really proud of those. It was a very spiritual household, and we didn't have decorative art, pretty art. But as I got older and began to collect, I loved African Mass. And when it says be proud of your roots, I think the whole problem with Mass, people don't understand their roots. We don't understand where we come from. We don't understand who we are. The African continent is a mystery to most of us, especially growing up. People didn't know it was the dark continent. It was a mystery. We weren't educated on understanding our roots and where we came from, and understanding we were beautiful people. We were educated. We had culture. We had all these beautiful things in this wonderful continent. But we didn't know. We weren't taught. The narrative was totally European. We might have been taught about slavery, maybe MLK. But often when people come to my home and they see the Mass, sometimes they're like, well, I don't like it, or it's not attractive to me, or there's a mystery behind it. And it's really not a mystery, it's just not understanding what the Mass is about, understanding the African continent and the beauty in the Mass. Like Jeremiah said, the features, things that resemble people that we actually know. So I always found them beautiful. I found the carvings beautiful, the intricate detailing, but often people will come in and say, I don't really like Mass in September, they look okay, or just something dark about it, or they're not comfortable with the Mass. And I think when people are uncomfortable, it's because they don't know, and they haven't been educated. So it's something that we have to understand and be proud of, and go back and study and understand, whatever part of the African continent you want to study, but understand the meaning behind it, the significance about the Mass. So I wanted to just interject that and segue that into the Last Supper, because often I think there's an ignorance and just not knowing the meaning behind the word. Right. And if you weren't exposed, if you weren't educated, and again, we were often told Africa is this place, and there's all these negative connotations about the African continent. And that's how we grew up. We weren't taught how beautiful the people are, intelligent. The resources there that people have been taking, raping year after year after year, and just taking from this amazing continent. So I think there's just this mystery and people not knowing their roots often. So I just wanted to segue that into the Last Supper, Dealing with the Man, which is an incredible piece. I actually took the piece to our Basel this past year, and people were just in love with this piece. It was such a strong statement piece to see 12 black masks sitting at this long white table, right?
That's beautiful.
It was powerful. It's like, okay, there's 12 masks at this white table. We're invited to this table. What does this mean? What is the meaning behind this? And dealing with the man, what does that mean? So I was really excited about the piece. Again, a lot of conversation around it. We actually got on the cover of Forbes.com. So again, it was a very meaningful piece. But I just wanted to highlight that quickly before we ran out of time. So I wanted to share that because people, they come in and I do collect, and they're all put by the Mass, and it's very interesting to me to see the reaction. And I just think people are uncomfortable with what they don't know.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's important to have spaces like this, right? The gallery is a hyperlink to global culture, but specifically, this is Black space. This is African space. This is a space for us to commune, understand, reaffirm, but also untrain and unlearn. And that's where the tension becomes. How can things coexist? I think it's important to understand that artwork is that point of departure. Wherever you decide to land, just land, right? Feel something, good or bad, right? And then once you feel that way, present it to the person next to you and see if it's the same. Start a conversation. I know we're running a little bit beyond time right now. Frank has kindly committed to answer any direct questions that you may have. I know the Last Supper piece was a real showstopper at Prism and in Miami during Miami Art Week, and I know a lot of people may have questions specifically about it, but just as a quick anecdote, because I know Frank wants to mention it, it is the most painted and recreated painting in history. So more artists have done their own renditions of it. So part of what I feel Frank has done and what we've talked about is that agency, like taking something that has presented as power, again, politics, and owning it and then distributing it again, right? So I think it's important for us to take all that we've learned in this conversation, talk to each other more about it. If you have more questions, I'm here, Frank is here, September, Rachel, we're all here to support and have a deeper dialogue. I thank you so much for coming out this Saturday. No, traffic is crazy, and but you're home. We still got some wine and some food. So hug a neck, happy Black History and Black Futures Month, and thank you. And lastly, I'm sure, Frank, you have some closing words before everyone disappears?
Yeah, sure. You can hear me?
Yes.
Sorry. The sound is cut every time. It's. Please, can you repeat what you said?
I said, did you want to extend thanks or any closing words before we end?
No, if you have some question, I'm ready to but I can answer your question if you have it.
Okay. All right, so what I'll do so everyone can kind of move around, I'll pull it off the speaker and you can just come directly up and engage him. So thanks again, everyone. Yeah.